There are some things you wouldn't mind being stuck with, like a large unexpected inheritance. An always on the verge of death phone that has to be plugged in just right so it charges is not one of those things. Switch to Verizon and we'll pay off your old phone, up to $800 via prepaid MasterCard, so you can get a new one. Just trade in any phone from our top brands on any unlimited plan. With new line on my plan. Additional terms apply for trade-in and pay off your phone offer. See Verizon.com for details.
Welcome to the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. I'm Sarah. Okay, we'll try that again. I'm Sarah. No, I think I may be able to... All right, no, I think I... Hang on a second, hold on. Tendidero! Ah, there she is. I figured that would work right there. Nicely done. Tendidero! All right, I'm Sarah.
I'm Trish. Tendidero!
We talk about wrestling news and various topics from different promotions, primarily AEW, but also New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWE, and topics from around the wrestling world. Whatever we find interesting, and we hope you will too. We are a proud member of the Social Suplex Podcast Network, and you can find our content on our podcast feed, the Social Suplex Podcast feed, as well as on Twitter and YouTube. Please feel free to like, subscribe, rate, and Tendidero our podcast. We also have a store at Chopped Tees, so if you would like to support us or just own a really cool quality piece of clothing, please take a look at chopped-tees/collections/Social Suplex Network. And yes, I understand that the backslash may be arbitrary and it may just be a slash, but guess what? I like backslash, so I'm saying it. Okay, there you go. All right, folks, as you may have guessed from the ridiculousness of our opener, we are going to start off our show by discussing New Beginning in Osaka, the New Japan Pro Wrestling show that happened last weekend. I didn't put a date down. Oh, I should say today's date, which is February 16th, 2025, Sunday, last Tuesday. Which saw a lot of it was an interesting show. It was some great matches. It was possibly, people are talking about it like it's the show of the year, which I always think is funny when people are, it's February, it's the show of the year. But to be hard, I think it will be difficult to match it because it was pretty fucking good. Trish, you get us started with this, my Tendideroing friend. Did you have a good time watching New Beginning?
I had the best time. I am horrendously British, as we find out on this podcast quite often.
Horrifyingly so.
Horrifyingly so. And it takes a lot for me to feel emotional about wrestling these days. You know, I feel like I've been, not beaten by it, but I've seen so much and hear so much that I don't find myself getting that emotionally invested. We've talked about this before. I chase the feeling of what things are. And this show was just everything that I'm looking for currently. It kind of summarized it all. So you had a ton of young talent in key spots, in key results, in the next part of stories being set up. And then you had such an emotional moment at the top. And that one was special. I think it was probably, when I listened to the crowd, I can't think of anything since Naito at Wrestle Kingdom 14 in terms of that kind of crowd response. From the moment he walked out, and they did such a great job with the slowing down the theme for the intro video thing.
Yep.
Making it like kind of very Game of Thrones Goto music style.
Goto of Thrones.
Goto of Thrones, yeah. There's going to be so many bad Goto puns. You deserve it. It's good. But yeah, the emotion of that and just that roar when he came out and they're straight onto the Goto, and it's the whole place is just rocking. And the way they carried that through the match was just phenomenal. And that's everything I want in a pro wrestling. So, but before we actually discuss the match. So you aren't obviously as regular a watcher as me. You don't suffer through Road 2s. What did you think of the show overall?
I thought it was an excellent show. I had the Japanese commentary on, so I'm probably confident that I missed some nuances, but I just really enjoyed it. I thought as a wrestling show, it was a lot of fun. Even without the English commentary, it was pretty easy to follow most of the storylines as they were going along. And I just thought the wrestling itself was just really fucking good. It was a good show that I just really enjoyed. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasurable and easy watch.
And I always think that it's kind of really important for the ecosystem that New Japan is strong, because it's such a differently presented product to any of its American counterparts.
Yes.
The style, the visuals, they do such a good job of presenting and promoting this program that when everything else matches up, I don't think anything matches it. And this really illustrated that. So we might as well start at the top with Goto and Zack, because that's definitely the headline from this thing. But, the build that they did for this across since Wrestle Kingdom, since he won the Rambo at Wrestle Kingdom, has just been fantastic. And really, this build didn't start there. So there's this misconception. We might as well deal with that off the top of the head. Because he won the belt, or he was signalled to win the belt, because they sold more tickets than they expected for New Beginning in Osaka. Crowd of 5,500, sold out, no capacity. This isn't true.
Yeah.
So this decision was something that they fell into, but it wasn't this year. And it's not that unusual for them to take decisions far out. So this time last year, for example, we knew that Naito was going to face Jon Moxley, and we knew Jon Moxley was going to win. So it's not that unusual to hear about these things. So Goto won the Rambo on Wrestle Kingdom Day. By New Year's Dash, 2 days later, it was out in Japan. Because that's when I first heard about it. And then that evening I was discussing it with someone who's become a really good contact for us in Japan, who's an awesome guy, and he'd heard exactly the same thing, and then who would come after Goto. So this wasn't something that happened because they sold well in Osaka. It did sell well. It's probably the biggest plus point for attendance so far this year. And then the next two Korokans are now sold out for Fantastica Mania as well. So hopefully you get that impetus. But it's a number of factors that kind of went into this. So, Zack has done everything. They gave him main eventing both shows at the Dome.
Yep.
First foreigner to main event 2 nights in a row and win. And, that's something that you can't write off. And he's done everything else. He took the title from Naito. He's done the international dates. He wasn't a huge drawing champion. I don't put that on him completely, because I think that they kept him in that mid-card for so long that it's impossible for him to be, turn into a super draw just overnight. But he now fulfills that spot where he is recognised as a champion, and they can use him then to kind of bounce back and forth if they need to go back to him at any point. They know he can deliver in these spots. And then also to elevate kind of the younger talent up, because that is such the key to that. And that's the key to this Goto thing as well. So they fell into this because David Finlay got ill during the New Japan Cup last year.
Yep.
And when Finlay got ill, Goto was the one that got plugged into his place. And they used a story of, unfortunately, his father passing away not long before that for his road to the New Japan Cup final. And in that match, he faced Yota Tsuji, and that was probably the first big match since the Sonata match when Tsuji came back, where you recognise that Tsuji could really be someone. And at the same time, I think what they realised is we are looking for a guy that can be at the top as well, and it can help elevate, because we need more than one. We're trying to replace Tanahashi, Okada, Naito, and other people in these roles. We need more than one. He's able to do this. He's able to work with the young guys. So they kept that in their back pocket. Tsuji won the cup, but they kept this in the back pocket. And then we got to the G1, and, Goto, same thing. He works with the younger guys. He's getting emotional responses. He had an incredible kind of night in Korakuen, where he leaves carrying his kids on his shoulder, and it's all full of emotion. Same thing. And then you've got something. So he can do all these things that we want him to do. We can do all these things that we actually set Sanada up for, when, Sanada having the belt for all that time, and then being in a G1 group with all of the Musketeers. The whole idea of that was that would be the guy they want to beat. But now, Sonata, yes, he's got the arm injury. You'll see him, he's got the odd arms. One's way bigger than the other. But it's like, he's not set, he can't be that guy now. So we need somebody in that slot. And all of a sudden, this guy emerges, and he emerges through his own work and his own connection to the crowd. This isn't a gold watch run. This has been done for a reason. And even more elevated when they did when he challenged Finlay in the fall. Again, they realised they had something. There's an emotional response here that they're not getting from anyone else on his level, and anyone else probably in the company that's one of your maybe mid-carders or not even young guys. I don't think anyone was getting this sort of response. So it made it very easy to plug him in, and it's all about elevation. So it's really weird to say that giving, a world championship to someone who's been around as long as Hiroki Goto is about elevation, but it is. This is about having someone that the young guys can beat to be elevated by, and not just giving somebody a gold watch run. And, I think it's all part of the strategy that they're going after. And I think he's so key because he just does all those little things right. And I think they can learn so much from him. And you can see people having developed, like Tsuji since then. Tsuji was phenomenal again with Gabe Kidd, who's also developing really, really well. And, Tsuji back-to-back, he had the Finlay match at Wrestle Kingdom as well. So, we'll forget Dynasty, but the Finlay match at Wrestle Kingdom and then this one. So, they definitely have this thing where he is able to make people better, and that's why he's in this position. So, he's going to face Tanahashi at the anniversary show. Fine, you need something to sell Otta. That's going to do more than what a Zack Taichi match is. But I'm not even thinking about that. I'm thinking, and I said this before, the show on Tuesday, is who is going to benefit more by beating who? So when I looked at it and you think, okay, so you've got your, the people that could possibly beat Goto or Zack, after this. And you think, okay, so you've got David Finlay, you've got Gabe Kidd, you've got Takeshita. And everywhere you look, the connections are stronger to Goto, and someone would get more out of that emotionally at the start of a reign, especially a heel, which is I think where we're going, than they would out of beating Zack. And it doesn't hurt Zack. And Zack's fine with it. Zack has no issues with losing the belt this way. They've given him a lot. And, especially, it's hard as a foreigner, to get a title run in New Japan with the main belt, let alone to get two Dome main events. So he's fine with it. But yeah, I think there's this huge misconception that this was just done as he was a routine challenger and we just given it because he got hot. No, this has been hot from building for a year now. That came out of the blue and they recognised it and they pivoted and they've made the right decision, and it will be used to elevate talent, and that will be his role. And he doesn't complain about that. This is a guy that's never complained when he's been looked over time and time and again. Previously the only guy to win a G1 to not be IWGP champion. But he's always worked hard, and if they put him in a tag division with Yoshihashi, he'll go and work in a tag division.
Right.
And they'll quietly have great years as a tag team. Underrated years as a tag team because their names aren't kind of, they're not as recognisable, as popular, or he's seen on a level. But he'll go in and do that. If you want him to go and work the young guys, he'll go and work the young guys. If you want him to deliver kind of incredibly emotional promos or interviews and things that really kind of stir your heart, he can do that too. We probably underrated him for a long time because he's been in there with some of the best people that have ever been in this industry that were all there at exactly the same time. But yeah, I'm so happy to see it. And when you watched all that kind of stuff afterwards, where Yoshihashi really kind of gives him his moment as well, and then with the kids coming in and everything coming down and him talking about his dad, I don't, even someone like me with a heart of stone, you can't, they're the sort of things you live for. That's what pro wrestling keeps us going with. It's what keeps us so invested. It's those sort of moments. And yeah, I was so emotional. And yeah, I'm getting emotional now. Oh my God. This ain't working, was it? But I was so emotional watching it because the themes and everything that was brought in and the way that he conveys emotion and the way they structured the match so beautifully where they used Zack's counter style and he used his submissions, and they slowed it down to control, and you felt this fight. And then when he finally kind of got on top, you knew that was it. And they still got you with the roll up, when he rolled through into the bridge, and you're like, oh my God. And then that's when the crowd lifts straight after that into the finish. But yeah, that was just perfectly executed, beautifully so.
I thought it was really well done. I thought as a match it was excellent. I did kind of crack up a little bit because it did feel at times like Zack Sabre Jr. was not getting the heel response that he sort of expected, which kind of cracked me up a little bit because I'm like, they do love Zack Sabre Jr. in some ways.
Yeah,
like,
he didn't. He did expect to get more.
On him. Yeah.
No, they just wanted Goto to win, and that makes him bulletproof, as was said to him. So that's a good thing going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, but I thought it was excellent. It was a great match. It was a great ending. The kids were extremely cute, and
they are.
I don't know what else you want. Like, what else you want out of a pro wrestling show? Nothing.
No, and there was another question we got as well, and yes. It was So obviously we were very harsh critics of the build to the Bryan Danielson win. And a question that someone asked me early in the week, why did this work for me, or in general, in a way that the Danielson thing didn't? And I think there's tons of reasons as to why. And, this one, they fell into a year build. They prepared it for a year. You can see the journey. If you watch... you can see the journey. And I think Walker Stewart, I know you watched with Japanese commentary, I did the first time, I watched with the English the second time, but I think Walker Stewart did a great job of explaining that. He keeps talking about it started with the New Japan Cup. This isn't a sudden thing. This isn't just something that blew up he won a Battle Royal, so now he's here. No, that's not what this is. And they got the timing right. So they didn't do this at Wrestle Kingdom. They didn't have, the older guy going over the younger guy on the big stage. Right. They let Zack have his moment, and right now there is nobody else. There's no one pressing, there's no one hot, there's no one kind of that you would put straight into that position, and you'll get more benefit from this. As we talked about, it's all about elevating the youth. It had a really clear aim as well. There was no kind of wishy-washy kind of this could be happening or this could not, or I don't really care, or I'll just go home. No, it was like, I need to do this.
Yeah, him wanting to win was a huge part of that, right? Like, you can't, again, we've talked about this to death, but Danielson not seeming like he cared about the title was a big detriment to that build of that match.
Yeah, and they just did such a great job of everything that surrounds it as well, and I think New Japan kind of don't get enough credit for how easy they make that. So, the interview segments that they did, the way they have their merch up, they had the doll Poinsuki. I'm going to get that wrong.
I'm not even trying.
But that sold really well actually. That one's in the top 7 with Naito. But they had the scarves there, and Osaka as well. So the whole place is covered in Goto scarves. They just get all that stuff kind of really, really spot on. And that's why I think this has moved things in terms of business more than that did. And, and I think he just conveys emotion so well. And you felt that. Like, you felt it with his kids and everything as well. And I mean, there was a day before, there was a user on the JCast Discord, Boucher, who made a video for Goto. And it was one of them things where I watched it, and, like, you just want to climb the walls. So you're like, oh my God, that's incredible. Like, and you just feel like that connection. And we'll talk about a secondary engagement later, but that's the kind of thing that you have to do and to make it work. And it just requires everything to kind of all be in a row, all ducks in a line. And I think that's why this one works. But most importantly, it's because of where it ends. It's not going to end with, he's not losing the title to Tanahashi.
No.
He's going to elevate somebody. And that's the whole point of this. So we get a great moment. That's fantastic. They've done it at the right time. It's not going to hurt anybody, but also we're going to get something out of it in terms of elevating up. Because, they've got a really good young core at the moment. From a year ago, where it felt like coming out of New Beginning and going into New Japan Cup, there wasn't really too much going on. It didn't feel like there was kind of a lot of elevation going on. And then, sometimes you need a vacuum in order to kind of regroup. And so then you had Okada going, you had Ospreay going. Naito, God bless him, has, his health is deteriorating rapidly, and they made the right move, and he made the right move to move into the tag division. Tanahashi can't do very much either and is now in his retirement year and probably would have been gone already if it wasn't for certain other things. So all of a sudden you've got this vacuum, and then you've then got to put the younger guys into his position. I think they've done a great job of doing that. So, you've got Gabe, you've got Suji, you've got Oleg Boltin. Boltin Oleg. Should be Boltin Oleg, sorry. He's a face who learned his craft in Japan. It's a respect thing. It's not a big deal. You've got Narita. Yeah, I know. You've got Shota Umino, who at least is doing something interesting, and they are pivoting and reacting to that finally. You've got Oiwa, you've got Fujita, you've got Umura coming back, you've got Drilla Maloney getting a big win at the start of the show over Shingo. You've got Finlay coming back in, which Japanese sources never wavered on. Let's be really clear. They always said he was coming back for the cup. It's only really American sources that kind of argued that one. So they have done a really great job of plugging everybody into these gaps. And now we're into this really exciting period where we don't know who's going to make it to the top, but there's a race, and the race isn't, who can kick somebody else down as quick as possible to keep their spot. It's who is going to kind of elevate to that spot quickest, who is going to succeed at the top. And I find that far, far more interesting than seeing the same thing over and over again, or what was previously happening in Japan when you look at the 2010s, where you had some of the racing, we see most famous of Kenny and Naito, but then it'd go, to Tanahashi and back, and then to Okada and back, and then to Tanahashi and back. And it was good in a way because it had that structure, but, they needed to escape from that. And this show was like a huge illustration of that. So you can say, yes, Goto wins on the top and he's facing Tanahashi. But then you look all the way underneath, and all the key spots are now involving younger guys or people that are hungry and that want to move up this card. And I think that makes it makes it the most exciting promotion, globally this year, because everyone else is seemingly kind of trading off nostalgia even further. Yeah. And this promotion is going to use a little bit of nostalgia to kind of get further up. And then everybody else upwards is just following on. And that definitely feels like something that Tanahashi's kind of sped up. I remember when he was doing his pledges last year that it was something that he was going to look at. But there was loads of other great things on this card that kind of illustrated that. So, Boltin Oleg and Takeshita.
Tremendous. Really fun, really good match. Just hard-hitting, respect beat up match between two guys. I don't know. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. I thought Boltin Oleg looked great.
Yeah, and he's come along really well, since he kind of, he lost his kind of young lion clothes and into what he is now. But what I really liked about this was I think it illustrated two things for me. So the first one is it makes you absolutely certain Takeshita could be a great world champion in this company.
Oh, yeah.
Because anyone challenging him gets elevated.
Is it the question of if, or is it a question of when?
It's a question of when.
Yeah.
It's a question of when. Yeah. And I'm still into a question. So we did get a question on Takeshita before I go back to the finish on this one. From our friend Doc. Sometimes our friend, sometimes time out. Hello, mate. And he said, after this last new beginning, how do you see the dynamics of the Reiwa generation, and where do you see Takeshita fitting in with him being left off the New Japan Cup? People are feeling as though he isn't figured into those plans. And when I look at Takeshita first and foremost, I think New Japan Cup was always going to be a difficult one because he needs to drop the other belt.
Yep.
And Revolution comes on the 7th or the 8th. Check that one.
I'll look it up. You just keep talking.
Okay, cool. Talking too much today already.
March 9th.
Thank you, March 9th. Yeah, so that's already into the start of the New Japan Cup. So I always thought that would make that a difficulty. And once the kind of he's free of belts in AEW, I think you will see a more significant move from Takeshita across. And once you do that, they've already said, they put it out publicly that they are going to, but they've also put out public, if he wants it, they're going to push everything behind him, which is really unusual for someone coming from another company that didn't come through their dojo. So, dojo. Sumo's in my brain. And so, yeah, he's going to get that. And I think the biggest sign that you can see of that is if you look at what they're doing with their American shows in April and May. You know, in April, he's the guy having the last match with Tanahashi in the US.
Yep.
You can't get any more kind of support from the president of the company than to do that. That's straight away, we're going to push you. That's a high push. And then he's at the front of all the advertising for the Toyota Arena show in Ontario, California, the month after as well. And he's not presented as in this guy from AEW. He's just, This is a New Japan talent. Yeah. So I have no worries about Takeshita. And I think this match really illustrated that he can lift people up. So he used all of Bolsonolic's strengths. You know, they played into that. They tried to make him a killer, but they did a really, really clever thing. It's so funny because there was a huge discussion a couple of weeks back, thanks to War, on the Takeshita. Was Takeshita and Fletcher? Yeah, Takeshita and Fletcher. I'm losing my brain. Takeshita and Fletcher and the Hounds.
Oh, yeah.
And it was talking about the finish and it being 250-50 and, not having a definitive winner and how that hurts, Takeshita and Fletcher going into the Australia show. And what I thought was, we look at and then the comparison was to the New Japan match structure. And the funny thing was, is that straight after that, and there was probably we probably engaged in far too much discussion over something like that, to be honest. But there was something in this match that was perfect in illustration of how you can make someone look absolutely strong, but then there was a definitive winner. And so they get towards the end, and he carries him into that choke, and he keeps it on him, and it looks like Bolton's going to fight back, and his arm it stays up, and then Takeshita has just that one quick movement to the crowd with his head, and the crowd go from excited that there might be a fight back from the babyface to, oh, it's over. They know. Like, it switches. They go silent. There's just this drop in noise, and it's awesome. And then he hits the finisher and is out, And it was very much like, no. Yeah, he's got fight, he's great, he's got strength, he can match me in so many ways, but I'm a cut above. And it was such a simple finish, but it was so decisive. It wasn't I snuck out with, a pin or something or a roll up. No, it was like, I am, right now, I am the better guy, I'm the strong, everything like that. But this guy's still great. And they just achieved so much with that. And I was just watching it and I was like, and that's why he's going to be a fantastic world champion for them. And he is the guy they need, the ace they need. So you can have your support guy. You can have guys that can be your fallback, like the same role Tanahashi was fulfilling from kind of 2019 to 2022, like that Goto can go into or Zack can do. But you still need that ace guy, and Takeshita is that. So I'm not worried about him. And the rest of the Reiwa guys, we'll see what happens with Shota now. Have you seen his lovely hair? Unique rocker look going on. Unique.
Sure, we'll call it that.
We've got everybody else back and involved now with Umura back in the mix, which is great. They all look, have you noticed they're all on a bit of a chonko diet?
Oh, yeah. Oof. They've got some, Gabe Kidd's butt is amazing. I'm sorry, I'm going to be, but Gabe's kid butt is amazing.
Yeah, so if you have noticed, a lot of the guys have filled out. This is a company-wide thing. They're all invested in it. The idea is to kind of be like real heavyweights, like of old. And, it's not supposed to be kind of get massive like bodybuilder weight. It's actually kind of just to carry more mass. So, some of the guys have had some struggles to kind of adapt into it. Conditioning, it's like anything when you put on additional weight, but they're kind of really getting a grip of it now. And Gabe's probably the most noticeable. You can spot Gabe a mile off. If you compare Gabe like 6 months ago and you look at now, but you look at Umura coming back, he's big. Suji's filled out quite a lot. I think he's enjoying being a bit more cut. Suji debate. Okay, so is it long boys or is it no?
Listen. I'm someone who almost 99 times out of 100, I'm going to prefer a long boy, but Suji was absolutely pulling. And listen, I will be. To me, looking at this as somebody who dips in and out, Suji feels way more close to a completed product than like a Shota Umino does to me.
Yep.
Like he just feels like he's not. I get the impression he's not 100% there, but he seems like a lot closer, and I feel like I can see improvement every time I'm watching. And the guy just has, to borrow a phrase, he has incredible live event charisma. And yeah, he just looked amazing. That match with Gabe Kidd looked amazing. The two of them just beating the shit out of each other was amazing. Like, I think it was my favorite match on the show, which what can I say? I'm a sucker for it. But yeah, I just really, really enjoyed that match. I thought they both did an incredible job. I could watch the two of them fight a dozen times over. I just really fucking enjoyed that. Not just because of the live event charisma.
But that's one of the reasons that it would ended in a draw. Was that this is a start of their rivalry.
Oh, yeah.
Not an end. And that was kind of to signify that. But yeah, Tsuji, if you'd asked me, if you look at him before he went away as Young Lion, and you would not have thought that he'd be the guy to come back and do this. But, he puts in the work. He works hard. He thinks about different things. He tries things, Yep. Thank God he's not running around with a football helmet or still on his head. But it's like, he'll try a thing. If it doesn't work, then he'll try a new look. The red fedora and the coat and jacket. Yeah, he looks like a star. We always thought that his in-ring work would be the thing that struggled compared to some of his counterparts around him. But that's really coming along now. And now he's having these matches where he's not having them with a Goto or an experienced person like that. He's doing it with someone of similar experience to him. And for me, for all my money, Finlay and Yota Tsuji at Wrestle Kingdom was the best match on that show. So, yeah, he's really stepping up. And I think he's not crushing himself under the pressure in the way that Shota did. And that's really important. They need that. They need these guys. I think there's this tendency to think you only need one guy. So you can just get Takeshita and that'll solve everything.
No, you need them fucking all.
Yeah, and
you need all of them. You need Kid. You need all these guys. Like, they all have to play a role. You can't just have one person because that's fucking... Who's it going to fight? It's boring.
Yeah, and that was the key to me, from what Tanahashi did in the 2010s, was he could have just been the guy. He could have been, what's the joke, Tan Cena, right? He could just keep on top for all that time, but he didn't. So then he raises Okada up, and then they get Naito up, and then they get Omega up, and then they try with JY, and then they try things that failed. We had that run in 2021, 22 especially, where the Evil thing didn't work, and the Sonata thing didn't work, and the Ibushi thing, and the Ospreay thing, and the Shingo thing was okay, but didn't really kind of achieve anything. So it doesn't always work like that, but you do need this group. I think, that is much more healthy. And I think, that's how we see WWE surviving currently, is that they have this big group at the top.
Yeah.
And although that's, that's interesting to navigate. But yeah, you do need kind of this big group of young guys, and, people will invest in them differently then. You're not going to attach yourself to everybody. So you're going to... It's like the old boy band things in the 90s, isn't it? Like, pick your favourite member.
Well, it's kind of true. I mean, you have to have a bunch of people that you're going to be invested in. And not everybody is going to be a Takeshita person. Not everybody is going to be a Gabe Kidd person. Not everybody's going to be a Shota Umino person. The goal is to have as many different varying guys that people can get behind, right?
Yep.
So that you do sustain that interest, and that it's not just like, well, it's just this one fucking guy all the time, so why am I watching?
Yeah. But it's an exciting time in New Japan. You're going to look at the attendances, and it's not as strong as the start of last year, and it won't be, because last year you had Tetsuya Naito with a belt on no knees. But they basically had a very strong first part of the year last year, and then a weaker second part of the year. And this year, I think we're going to see the opposite. They're going to be a little bit behind for the first part of the year, and then they've got some big shows planned for the end of the year. So you look at the G1 finals in Ariake Arena. It's a much, much bigger venue than Ryogoku or Budokan. So, what have they got planned for there? I think the aim is to kind of really kind of peak towards the end of the year this year, and we'll see if that kind of holds on. So, yeah, it's this one is a success. New Beginning Osaka is a success, considering there's only one New Beginning show this year and not 3 or 2. Hokkaido venue's shut, and no Nagoya this year, so they are running a deficit in that way. But I feel like it made the tour better, everything leading up with the tags, it kind of flowed more into this one and made sure that we had a really strong card from kind of beginning, to end, which included, foreign talent on it. The Bucks were over, and they had another great day out in Osaka in terms of the crowd and everything like that. Did their best to highlight Naito, because that's what they're there to do. Yeah, I think people forget what people were actually there to do sometimes. But yeah, who is really struggling. Hiromu is not babysitting him, but will do absolutely everything he can to kind of look after him now. So.
Every time Naito goes up for a Destino, I hold my breath.
The one at the end, Nick flips. I'm sure Nick flips him.
100%. I was like, he almost.
Yeah, if you watch, like, Nick, you can just see, like, I'm sure there's, like, an extra motion where you watch Nick flip him. Yeah. And then flip himself into the bump. But I'm pretty sure he flips him. But that's what they're brought in to do. You know, they're one to be the national tag team, that put over, the Japanese team. On Foundation Day, they're kind of Japan's birthday. I remember saying in our group chat on Monday, I was like, they can't beat Goto on Japan's birthday. How dare you? You can't do it. Not again. It's like, but yeah, like that was the whole point of it. But they recognise that he is so valuable still. You only have to look at if you go look at their merch numbers and everything like that you'll just see like LIJ merch everywhere. So the best way to utilise him is to do that rather than to leave him in the singles thing, struggling, not being able to do what he wants to do. This is a guy who's incredibly loyal to that company, who loves that company, who's given his body to that company, same way Tanahashi has. And, you found a usage for him in that division, and it makes perfect sense. And especially when you've got Bishamon coming out with Goto being in singles divisions, we've kind of swapped them. And we've made kind of both as valuable as they can be in this role. So, yeah, it's just a case of putting people in the right roles. And for now, it's a very promising time for New Japan. And, I think it's healthy for the ecosystem. And, Japanese wrestling at the moment is... there's a lot of good news stories coming around. Stardom sold out Korakuen, biggest attendance they've ever had last month.
Yep.
Noah are, under their kind of new heel champion are doing pretty well as well in terms of attendances. So there is some good news story rather than just the yen is down, which is still a challenge. The fourth quarter results were a struggle. There's no pay rises this year. And there won't be, these are financial challenges that they have to kind of contend with. So yeah, they have to pick and choose what they're doing, who they're using, who they're bringing over. Everyone they bring over needs to be of value, like forget that stupid Baron Corbin idea, please, for the love of God. And you've got to invest from within. So all these conditions have meant that they kind of have to do this stuff, and I think it's definitely more healthy for everyone. So yeah, very positive start for the year for New Japan, I think. In terms of what it's building going forward, which may be more important than what they're achieving right now. So, right, we're sticking to Australasia.
Yes, we are going to cover Grand Slam Australia, which happened. Time
night?
fucking differences. It aired last
morning.
night.
Yeah, yesterday morning my time.
Yeah. Good show. I think it was saved as a show by a bunch of factors. We'll talk about some of the, I don't want to say controversy around it, but, complaints, I guess. Many of them extremely valid. Like, I think that's an important thing to remember, is just because the show ended up good, like some of the stuff surrounding the announcement of it. And we were very lucky. We had a bunch of reports from people who went, people who went writing to us about what it was like going into it, which I think was really important. We heard from Sam Dugan, who was extremely helpful to us in sending us like a list of he wasn't sure if he was going to go because he was sort of concerned he'd be disappointed. But then he said his wife bought him tickets, and talked about the advertising or lack of advertising, and the lack of communication. I think one of the things that both of us were sort of shocked by is that the start time of the event was not really published in advance. Like, it wasn't on people's tickets. So trying to figure out when the show actually started was in some ways a challenge.
And that was interesting because he said his wife picked up on that, someone who's not just in this wrestling ecosystem.
Right.
That was really annoyed, like, why is there not a start time on it? Because you're trying to plan your lives,
Yeah, you got flights to do.
Yeah, and this was a travel-in show. So pretty much every single person that we've spoken to has travelled into this show.
Yes.
And that's a big difference maker, and that has its bonuses because that kind of crowd that you get, that kind of crowd that feels very similar to like the European shows that you see, when companies have gone into Europe, is you get that concentration of kind of people that are already invested in the product.
Yep.
So you don't have this mix of kind of hardcores and then casuals or people that have just come along because they've been comped, or so you have people that want to be there for AEW. And, I thought it was interesting. So we had quite a few reports, but Corey sent over a report today as well and talked about, how many people were kind of in WWE gear, because that's, the big company in Australia traditionally. And who had spoken to people that had been to Perth last year as well. So we got quite a unique viewpoint of how the two are comparable. But also there wasn't this like animosity towards AEW. So it's like they like both.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I don't think that's that uncommon. And you can see it because you look at what happens with Collision every time there's a big event. There's a bigger crossover than a lot of people want to acknowledge. Yeah. For one reason or the other. But that doesn't mean you can't enjoy both. Like, if that's something that you choose to do, and obviously there's plenty of people there that did, that's great. But they even, they're wearing that. They were massively invested in this product. They knew who everybody was. They got behind everybody.
It didn't seem like an audience of casual fans was how it was described to us. People knew what was the storylines. They knew who to cheer for. It was not people. There were some casual fans there, but it was not people just there for a casual fan type thing.
Yeah, and I think, and also what Sam was talking about, so Sam, who's got on his AEW Match Guide, has got a summary of his kind of experience up already, so thank you for his feedback as well, was that, there were plenty of issues going into this, which meant that there was some unhappiness. So, they did... so when this was kind of set up and announced, there was the kind of teaser that went through from Sporting News in Australia on the 14th of August last year. And then it was announced on the pre-show All In. And they called it, the biggest TV night of the year was the tagline that was used just before they announced it. But it wasn't presented as like a TV card in their kind of promotion.
No.
So you had this situation where kind of, we're doing the fan perspective first. This is kind of how it looks from a fan perspective. But they didn't write, like they would traditionally on Grand Slam or Winter is Coming, like Dynamite Winter is Coming.
Right.
Or Collision Winter is Coming. Or Dynamite and Collision Grand Slam, which we've seen predominantly used for the last couple of years. There was none of that. So it just said Grand Slam. So, you look at that and you look at, just from a perception type of view from visually, it looks the same as a pay-per-view logo. If you stick that next to Revolution, it looks more akin to that than it does to kind of the TV presentation. Yeah, exactly, right? So there was a perception straight away that this was going to be a big show. And obviously you combine that with being in a stadium and originally. And it's one of those things that a lot of the kind of complaints of this are related to that because they were brought in. I know that they say it was by the tourism board is what's been the public climb, but I know Corey, who was there this week, pointed out that there was no material that showed kind of the tourism board.
Yeah, they usually advertise that.
Yeah, which you traditionally see. Yeah, so you'd see something that said like Brisbane 2032 or visit kind of Queensland or wherever, not Queensland. But you would see that, you'd see that material. And you weren't seeing kind of any of that whatsoever. It just relies to their kind of promotional group, to the promoter, to the Dainty Group at TG. So it's like it's probably more likely that the promoter brought them in and the promoter will bring them back than it is that it was the actual state. There's no evidence. It's kind of similar to Lyon, in France when WWE ran there and there was a kind of question over that. It feels a similar question in that regard where there's no evidence of it being, from the state, and it's more likely that they were paid, but by the promoter to come in. Right. But, the stadium was overambitious. They're on Foxtel. More and more people are picking them up, but they are still very much, pretty short for actual viewership and promotion and kind of visibility in that. So to then ask people to travel to Brisbane, which is very far, it's not like, you're just driving up to the next city. No. This is a 3-hour flight from other cities in Australia. It's like you can't, that's where the kind of the big show thing probably was needed, but probably was never going to be enough. So if that stadium had not been announced and if they just announced an arena show, and you've got 11,000 people in there, which was the Dave estimate this morning, then this would be looked at as a massive success.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is a success, but it's now a success with kind of dots at the end. Yeah, caveats, right? So it's one of them things. So yeah, it's a success in itself. And, there's this thing that you could do like, oh, now we could do 10,000 in Sydney or 10,000 in Melbourne. I'd be really careful with that because this is your first time in that market. So people travelled in. They travelled in. We've heard stories of people, in the airport and everywhere this morning full of kind of wrestling shirts. So this was a travelling show, very similar to how AEW pay-per-views were at the very, very start of AEW, where you got that feeling. People would travel in Chicago for All Out, or they'd travel into Vegas, thank you, for Double or Nothing. It's very much similar to that. So, when they've not advertised exactly when they're coming back next year, and I guess, the worry is about where is Elimination Chamber, because there's still a date that WWE have with Perth, I believe, on their contract. So maybe you're trying to protect against that. We've seen a lot of that as of late. Yep. But if you do go back and you go to, the major cities, if you go to Sydney, you go to Melbourne, I don't think you want bigger venues. I actually think you want slightly smaller. So maybe like 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 to kind of create demand, because everything that happened with the organisation, and this is something that's been consistent in an issue with AEW in the last few years.
Yes.
And it's all these other kind of things underneath. So the merch situation, actually they brought more merch than what we did in terms of range than what we did to All In this year, but there wasn't enough of it. There was one merch stand, it's all sold out, so there was a lot of there was little bits of disappointment about that. The stuff about being moved venues and then not being able to kind of refund your tickets, and then not knowing where you're going, getting different ones, getting put in the wrong way. We've got people with individual stories that we've had of who bought like rows 2 to 5 and then had to, found themselves 30 rows back and then had to come back. So all that sort of stuff, you eliminate that, and they're going to have to price it. So the biggest complaint, I think, there's 2 biggest complaints that we've seen, and this was what resulted in, if you think, most people think it's what resulted in Tony Khan being, most feedback we've had is this what resulted, was one, that they moved it from the stadium to the arena and they didn't change the pricing or allow you to book your own tickets again. So instead you paid stadium prices for the arena.
Yep.
And you can't really do it. I don't think they probably made a decision. If you were brought in by a promoter, that's probably a promoter decision, but it's poor. Right. And then he brags about it. So yes, you want to sell your product, but you could have gone in, we've got 11,000 people here. That would have been much more healthier than we've done a $1.3 million US gate. One of our biggest foreign gates that we've ever done. When you've that process was not fan friendly. I would have avoided that completely. And the second one was they fell into, unfortunately, the same trap that they often fall in, where they didn't deliver everyone they advertised. Which is...
a lot of complaints about no MJF, no Swerve, no Hangman, no not Osprey. Ricochet. They were,
Mojo,
there were a lot of complaints about that. And that's valid. I think they did a better job on delivering people than other AEW shows have, right? Yeah. I don't think it was a huge bust, a total bust, but I also think that it would have been disappointing. And I think it ties back to some of the idea of like, I think this happens over and over again, and it's not just an AEW problem, because you see WWE sometimes do it too, where it's like AEW fans that are going to go to the first AEW show in Australia are fans of AEW. They're not fans of Australian wrestlers in AEW, right? So you make a decision that you're going to build the show around Australian wrestlers, and if you're not giving them opponents that the Australian audience cares about, you run the risk of like the audience kind of not giving a shit, period. Now, I think they lucked out in this, in that they had like a better build for some of these programs. And, obviously Kyle Fletcher had Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay in there, and Tony Storm and Mariah May. Like that's a different situation, right? But, you could almost sort of see it with Okada. I felt like the match that had the least heat was Okada and Buddy Matthews. And that was one where it was kind of like, where did that one seems specifically to me to be about pandering to a nationality. But
look, I think you want some of that, I guess, is what they will always look at. I think they look at what WWE did with Elimination Chamber last year, and they focus very much on that. I think they had Rhea Ripley with Nia Jax in the main event, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
And so there is obviously a thing to that there, but I think, yeah, the second biggest complaint that we got, other than the kind of stadium to arena and the pricing issues and everything like that and the setup, and the organisational things, which are things that we see all the time, was that there was major stars missing. And the major stars that have been the key to the last 2 weeks of TV.
Right.
So the last episode is dominated by MJF and Hangman, both advertised when this show went on sale, not there. Why?
Right.
Why are you not flying them? And a week before, the other big story was Swerve and Ricochet. That was a big story that Tony was promoting for the last couple of weeks when he's been out doing interviews. Not there. Why? That's, you made a choice. They made a choice there that they went with what would fill the card. And they obviously had too much to fill the card anyway, looking at the cuts that they made on TV, which we'll talk about in a second. But you need to deliver them. This is the things that, so, they can put on a premium product, right? So they put on that show, fans that, in terms of the show that they received, in a vacuum, they loved it.
Yes.
They absolutely loved it. They enjoyed it. The atmosphere raises it up. You get that sort of invested crowd. There's a lot of energy because it's the first time you've interacted with this product live for a lot of people. That always has that thing. It's the same thing that, TNA used to use massively when they come to Europe and they look like the biggest company in the world, and then they go back. And, same way with WWE, their European tours. When we see it with Leon and that, and the atmosphere there, and how people reacted to that. It's the same thing. So you get that energy. So that's really important. It really raises everything. And then they did build the matches that they had really well.
Yes.
Harley Cameron and stuff is obviously being lauded everywhere, and it should, because she's brilliant. Yep. And she is. And then, tag match has been built very well. It's opened a lot of shows recently. The first tag match, sorry. And then Tony Storm and Mariah May, obviously it's a long-standing story. And, they wanted that key moment in front of that Australian crowd. So, they did a lot to build that. And that really did come across. And what you're left with sometimes of AEW, so what you get at times is like that. This was set up more like the old style kind of TV specials. You think like Winter is Coming, or, the old Fighter Fest. Like before it kind of became less so of that because of all the pay-per-views that we now have. It was set up to feel like that, and I think it's exceeded in that. But what will maybe prevent people from buying a ticket straight away next time is, will I get to see who I was supposed to see that was advertised to me?
Right.
When you advertise, so the list of people they advertised at first that weren't there, so Paige, Black obviously left, but hey, still there, Brody King, Samoa Joe, Orange Cassidy, who they have merch on sale for, so Strickland, Darby Allin, MJF and Ricochet. So there was 9 people they advertised that weren't there. You can't keep doing that. It has to stop. So that's why, on a fan perspective, it's like, we saw this great product, we saw this, but that's why we're left wanting more, and not in a positive way, because you advertise this to us. You need to just deliver on what you advertise, and that's where they struggle with. So it's a premium product with poor kind of secondary setup, and that seems, that's a consistent theme. That's nothing new. But hopefully, you look at it and hope that it raises the kind of visibility of AEW in that country, and they get something out of this. And that's really difficult to do. You have to be consistent in your follow-up. It probably doesn't help that it wasn't on on live viewership. They 6:30 this evening was the first time they saw it in Australia. And then because it was a shortened show, it had to fit into the 2 hours. It's kind of a little bit choppy. So we talked about the live part of the fan experience, but I think the other part of the fan experience was seeing it on TV as well. And that was a strange one. So in terms of actual viewership as a TV viewer, I think they gave you lots to get excited about in the last few weeks in terms of what was going to be on there.
Yeah.
But then the timing, so we'll talk about what it means for business afterwards, because I'm trying to split this down between kind of fans first, and then we'll talk about the wrestlers and the business. But it's, so they went on after the All-Star game, All-Star kind of weekend festivities, not the game, that's tonight. But it's, what they did was so everyone's waiting around for the kind of the time of it, and they'd actually already loaded it onto Triller, 10:30 Eastern. 7:30 Pacific. So we ended up with this 2 starting thing. And the time that it started, you're waiting so late for something that you're not putting on it as a prime time for your audience either. So a lot of people aren't seeing it live. They're not engaging with it live, that sort of thing. It doesn't have that global kind of feel to it. And that's a thing that, they use a lot now to make things special. We're not in the 80s or 90s anymore where people want tapes. People want to see things here and now. We live in a world of here and now. And I felt like that cut off some of the engagement that you would have had with the fan base with this. If it had been that kind of thing, that's kind of how much special it feels. So you had this great engaged crowd, and then they kind of mess with it with the audio and stuff, and it's in and out, and it's all those sort of they do this kind of weird. They just went in choppy and the cuts and that stuff.
It seemed from all the fan videos you saw and from some of the other stuff that came out, it seemed as though the noise of the crowd was really diminished with the what was on TV. Like it didn't. You felt Dave said this morning, and I agree 100% with him that it genuinely felt like you knew they were louder, like you could hear in the background they were louder, but somebody turned the mix down on the crowd audio way down so we could hear everything else. And so it kind of came through in this sort of muffled way that made it really weird.
Yeah, and look, and I just felt like for something you wanted to be one of your biggest TV shows of the year, as you put it originally, like you did everything to make it not feel important to your standard viewer.
Right.
So I don't care about we'll talk about leading business in a minute, but in terms of your actual viewer, who wants to see, Tony and Mariah after all this build, now has to stay up to 1 a.m. Right. Like, that's not a great way to kind of present big nights to your audience. And then, on a day where there was the NXT Vengeance Day pay-per-view, obviously they did, that was a deliberate cross-promotion, but that was on earlier. So, and then the Four Nations hockey, and then you've got, your All-Star Dunk contest. And then when you do get it on, it's on earlier on for people that's on Triller, and that kind of disrupts everything as well. So it's one of them. You watch a show, it's fantastic. They got most things right. They should have done the Copeland challenge there. We knew Copeland was going to be massively over there because, ex-WWE stars in Australia.
Huge.
They were, yeah. And then they did the daft finish. But I think I almost want to leave some of the booking for a couple of weeks and just see what they do, because there's so much weirdness out of that
there's weirdness out of that. There's weirdness with Orange Cassidy's return. I'm kind of like, I'm in a wait and see mode, because otherwise I'm just going to be pre-complaining, and that's ridiculous. But it definitely raised a few eyebrows for us, and I think it's going to be one of those things where it's like, let's see where this goes, because these were some weird choices.
Yeah, so, but from a fan perspective, as in terms of consumption, they didn't make it easy for their fan base to consume this massive show. And in a way, that's a shame for one reason or another. And I think this kind of goes into the wrestler side as well. So, it looks like Tony and Mariah are continuing, and I think that's probably the right thing to do, because from a wrestler side, so you gave them a great live moment in front of their live, the live home audience for Tony Storm, but in terms of, what it does for a wrestler, like, there were some things like the standing ovation that Harley Cameron got. They kind of had to cut all that back, So things that would actually benefit them as wrestlers to be seen, and you get that moment and to get it in front of as many of your actual fans as possible to elevate them. We're not really seeing that. Are people looking at it and looking at who was brought and who wasn't, and looking at it as a hierarchy thing? So how much are these people worth? How much are they not? Are they going through similar things to what they had with All In 2023 in the UK, where we didn't bring everybody? Did that upset people? Did it not? I don't know. Does that make a difference because it's in an arena and not a stadium? Right. I think there's lots of kind of questions like that. It was, I think the wrestlers got to go. It's an amazing experience. How much does it benefit them, in terms of their position or anything like that? I don't know. Maybe that's a rolling case. But then when it comes to the business side, so I thought what was really interesting with this, so we've gone fan first and then to the business side, was, when you listen to like Tony Khan's comments, so I know Sean Ross said this week that it was never going to be a pay-per-view because it would be financially unviable. Okay. So what were you aiming for? And when you look at his comments like on media calls and that sort of thing, he's very vague. And I know he's not a great communicator, right? But he's very, very vague in terms of it. And it feels almost similar to what happened with All In 2023 as well, where they were pushing for this kind of max special thing, and it didn't happen. Yes. And then they had to settle for something. So, Collision could do with the lead-in, They have some really, really struggle. They struggle some weeks with especially when they're counter programmed, as they are massively these days by WWE programming. So they can actually do with the lead-in for their averages. It's really important to them. And there's this whole thing about it takes you to a new base. I don't believe that's as big, though. And
No.
the NBA is something that is on the same channel. For in terms of the crossover, I think the Four Nations hockey probably had a bigger audience, especially because it had higher distribution yesterday. And then they don't promote it, so there was no advertisement or commercial for Collision in that last half an hour. As that kind of thing was concluding, I think there's one line from one presenter saying All Elite Wrestling's coming up next. Nothing mentioned about the event. Nothing mentioned special. It's kind of poor cross promotion. And then that thing kind of 7:38 Pacific, 10:38 Eastern, thanks to Chris, who always gets these little who notes all these notes for us. That's when their kind of main contest ended, and and then it was another 11 minutes before their official coverage ended, and 3 minutes after that when Collision started. So whether you'll see as much benefit from that as maybe they thought they would, I'm not sure. But the audience you get there, they're not your audience as much. So you're getting this number, so it feeds up the number. That's great. But are you putting on some of your biggest TV for your audience? How does that help with kind of that maintenance? I think it's quite a different question. And then what does it say that this seems to be 2 times now that you've chased kind of a Max special and it's not happened?
Right. That's to me the bigger, what is their relationship with Warner Brothers Discovery, that they've sort of set these up as though they're going to be big Max events and they haven't been able to make that happen. Right. That's the more interesting piece to me. And I think I agree with you that I think the idea that like an NBA audience is going to watch Will Ospreay and suddenly you're going to gain a bunch of regular, TV show viewers of your product is kind of, not necessarily a 2025 thing, right? Like, I don't know. I think that the idea that you have this big lead-in, yes, it's great that you have the lead-in. If it picks you up any viewers, that's fantastic. But the people who watch your product are the ones who are invested in Toni Storm and Mariah May. And it's like you said, Trish, they didn't, you have to wake up to see it, or you have to stay up late to see it, or you're not going to see it live, and that kind of minimizes the amount of excitement you're going to have talking about it. Like, I'm not sure how much that benefits.
I just don't believe that they set out to do a show that would be at 2 hours at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night,
right,
which would come after the hockey, a big hockey game. It would come after the All-Star stuff. I thought, the whole point of being where they were is to avoid all that All-Star stuff. That's what it felt like to me when they first booked it. And then come after the NXT pay-per-view.
Right.
POE, whatever. But that's felt like the whole point of this was to avoid all those things. So the idea is that you get your content out there first, and then they have time. If this was a Max special, so to speak, you have that time where you get that kind of that feeling of what's going on with that Harley Cameron stuff would be able to resonate.
Sure.
These things would be at Toni Storm. That was very a quick cut off as well. And now you're reliant on the follow-up on this stuff when actually you could have given more time to that moment, but you were unable to because of the restrictions that you had. And then, so I don't believe that they set out to do that. I think this is what's happened. And I think you have to look at this deal now and say, okay, so you're set up to do pay-per-views, and, a reduced price on Max, but continue your distribution elsewhere. And you're set up to do TV. Is there anything that allows you to do anything else on Max? Are they still looking at it and going, actually, we'd rather you get the lead in so it buoys up Collision numbers? Is that still more important for them than, in terms of their value? Do they think you impact value more with that than they do with Max? And that's not to say that WBD are the most kind of, again, organized company in the entire world, because they aren't. But it's definitely a question of why has this now happened twice? Because, Tony can say it to his face. It's like a great opportunity. And actually, it's really useful for them, for their Collision numbers, fantastic. But I don't believe that's what they set out to do. I don't. I don't believe that they aim to do this and to basically give so much competition the advantage on them and not be able to achieve so much as they wanted to. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why Tony and Mariah is continuing. To me, that's what it feels. Enjoyable show in the most part. Some baffling stuff coming off it booking wise, but we'll see how that kind of rolls out. And going into this week where there are some setup for some matches, especially with Ospreay and Fletcher, and then Omega and Takeshita, which was kind of half rolled back, but whatever, for Revolution.
I don't know. I guess to me, my big question is, if Takeshita is the champion, why does he have to beat people to face Kenny? Why wouldn't Kenny have to face people to get to Takeshita? That's the kind of stupid little stuff that my brain's like, wait, what? Like,
yeah, let alone
what?
why is Orange Cassidy coming back into this program and not doing something with the Death Riders that he swore he would never allow to win, or not going after Hangman Page? Obviously, that's a drop thing now because of the mic stuff. But yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Why is his return just on a thing, a sticker like, here you go, yeah, he's in this match? Is that how important he is? That's a question. But there's always little things like that.
There's some odds.
There are some things you wouldn't mind being stuck with, like a large unexpected inheritance. An always on the verge of death phone that has to be plugged in just right so it charges is not one of those things. Switch to Verizon and we'll pay off your old phone. Up to $800 via prepaid MasterCard so you can get a new one. Just trade in any phone from our top brands on any unlimited plan. With new line on my plan. Additional terms apply for trade-in and pay off your phone offer. See Verizon.com for details.
Stuff like
Yeah.
we said, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same with the Jay White and Cope and stuff, because you're just like, you don't have any friends this week? Oh no, you don't. They decide they're in a tag division and the other, but yeah, they had the big Aussie sing along. It absolutely should have been a title match there and not a Revolution. I think they might need to adjust that, because the idea of that going on Revolution after Omega and Takeshita and Ospreay and Fletcher and MJF and Page is just good luck. Good luck.
I'm sure it'll be amazing.
Yeah, we might as well just so Dynamite this week is actually built around a face-to-face with Paige and MJF, so I'm just going to skip a little bit to that. So being that we spent quite a lot of time last time talking about MJF and Hangman.
So much fun.
Yeah.
I want to fight with you every week.
Yeah, and actually people were hopeful. They went with me, which I am still in shock by on our polls. But I think that's just more in hope. So, but
I also find it very fascinating because personality-wise, I think you would agree that you are much more of a pessimist and I'm much more of an optimist.
Yeah, and we flipped on this one, which is what makes it interesting, right? But yeah, for yourself, after seeing what they did in this first week, how do you feel now? Do you feel more positive or less?
Listen, I'm riding high. I loved Dynamite this week. I really enjoyed all the stuff they did with Hangman and MJF. It was the exact kind of stuff that I want, where it happened across multiple segments. It flew in. It flew. No, it flowed. That's what I was looking for. It flowed. It flowed naturally from one segment to the other. It made sense. Like, there was some nice character beats. I thought MJF, was the first time in a fucking year that I was excited to listen to him talk, that I thought he did a good job and he didn't just fucking phone it in. My God, I was thrilled. So from that perspective, so far, I'm like, Trish is right. Huzzah. I'm thrilled for you because, again, like I said repeatedly, it's what I wanted. We'll just see how it all plays out. I thought there were some really nice little touches. You talk about this because you were the one who saw this and I didn't see it.
Okay. Yeah, I know which one you mean. I'll talk about a few of them. I thought, the first little promo they did, Hangman had the line, "It's been 5 years. Is that the best you've got?"
So good.
And I think
perfect.
Because it wasn't just because he did the corny little line. That is the question on Max right now.
Yeah.
This is the question on his entire career. Right, we've seen what you've given us. Is that it? I think and the way that was played in was perfect. I think that did such a great job. And then the way that Max switched then into the kind of serious thing and went into the kind of character stuff and the character stuff that we want to see. Yes. And then they continued that. So then when they did the kind of the brawl and he calls him out and says, you won't come down here, you're a coward. I'm so surprised that no one picked up at how close that was to the Punk call out.
Yeah.
And then they did the kind of the angle bit afterwards that he comes out and he's not the coward. Actually, no, he's turning back, he's becoming the babyface again. And yeah, he's definitely not a coward. And you do that in a really clever way. So you're not doing that as in, we're mimicking this or pointing at it, with big flashy WrestleMania signs. That's not what you're doing here. What you're doing is using these things to kind of become part of that narrative to kind of undo some of that damage as well.
Yeah.
So I thought it was really, really clever.
But in such a subtle way.
Yes.
That it wasn't like, oh, here's my work shoot promo that I'm going to talk about. Like, here's the hammer that I'm hitting you over the fucking head with. No. They did it in a perfect way that it fit the thing. Everything was great. If you keep doing this shit, I don't have any problem with whatever you want to work into this.
Yeah, because it was just set up to get that big pop and, you know, to kind of show him in that way. And then they played off it because he's so great with his facial expressions, not just with the stuff at the backstage, but how he then looks at the crowd after that, how he's looking at the crowd and Max Cash does. You know, this is why he's so good, because he doesn't need to say as much.
No.
So we can make Max say less and more kind of distinct, and then Hangman doesn't need to say as much. He doesn't need to start talking. We'll have a timer next time. We'll see if he's overtaken his last year of promos and he's finishing Max on Wednesday. But you know, that's the big next test. We'll see how Wednesday goes. Obviously, you know, it's the biggest thing presented for that show.
See how the ticket sales go. I mean,
this
is a big
the rating goes.
Big for both of these guys that they put both of them out there early and have been pushing it as a big thing. I mean, obviously that's a regular for MJF, but we haven't seen that with Hangman in quite a while.
No, but you know, he's for Hangman as well, and for MJF. You know, this is, you know, if you want to look at it as a control thing, as a battle of ideologies. You know, there's the young guy stepping up now. And, you know, if they are, I think it'd be very interesting to keep an eye on. You know, last week they were predominantly positioned as the key thing ahead of this Death Rider Copeland stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And it'll be very interesting to see if that continues, because that does normally shift, kind of indicate a shift in Tony Khan's thinking. We've seen that many times before when things get minimized and things get kind of accelerated. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. But the other thing that they did that kind of noticed was they made it about the World Championship, and especially at this time, you know, that's very clever. Whether they did it themselves or that's something they think about, is you make it about the world title, then you know you're putting pressure on him. It's the same thing Swerve did, you know, when he turned down the OC thing, and then him and Hangman, you know, consistently talked about the world title all the way through. They still do now. Swerve's still talking about the world championship now. You know, these guys make it difficult in a way for the booker in some ways, but not in a like, oh, we're demanding things, but you know, you're going to create this expectation. Yeah, this program has to go towards the world title, and eventually you're going to probably have to deliver it for both. And you've got to work out how you do that, and you don't cut him off, because you know you need to be very careful with this Hangman face turn. I think they have the opportunity to do something that, you know, we someone brought it up on our board thread, and it's an incredible point. They have never really achieved a turn to a babyface with a big babyface moment and then sustained it. Right. So we've had lots of turns that were brought about by injury. Adam Cole has gone heel to face twice without any explanation whatsoever when he's come back from injury. We've had people go face but without any kind of actual thing, you know, babyface agency. It's like Swerve or like MJF in the summer of 23. Like, we have lots of this in terms of babyface turns, but we don't really get them big agency moments. I think the closest I got when I asked our Discord this week was Eddie Kingston covering up John Moxley for the fake explosion, which obviously was ruined by the explosion, or non-explosion, as the case may be. And then by Wardlow turning on MJF, which was then ruined by MJF. So they have an opportunity to deliver that big babyface moment, that big kind of thing that really kind of pushes somebody forward that's kind of iconic in a way that they never have before and have never actually gone to before in that way, if they get this right. But once you set it running, that thing's like going to be like a train downhill, and if you think it was bad last year, it'll be even worse this year. They need to be careful.
Do you think that potential turn is undercut by the fact that the audience has only briefly at times embraced Hangman as a heel?
No, because they will boo him. But also they're kind of ready to cheer, but they can sense it, right? So I think when you do these sort of things and it's kind of out of nowhere, it doesn't work. But a lot of these things, the crowd's already moving. You know, Gabe Kidd's another example.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
So, but he did that with the way that, similar to the Sami Zayn thing, where they got attacked. So they don't have the agency in this.
Right.
They were attacked, but they have that turn. But you've already noticed that crowd's already moving. And with Hangman, they've been moving for a little while now, and especially I think since the house burning and a death match, and you know the Daniel stuff. It's like you can feel it growing, and you know they messed up a little bit with it in the in the fall, and we know how much of a mess it was, but you can see it especially since the new year, and you just then have to capitalize that by getting that moment right. Like, it's there, it's waiting for you. And he set it up. He keeps doing these ramp stuff. We know what it's gonna look like if he gets a choice, because he set it up. And his is so easy because he's taken. I was listening to Jake Roberts at a convention thing today, talking about as a heel, like, your character needs to go with you as well as your moveset and everything else, and you need to live the whole character. Look how much he's changed. Look how much his look is starting to change with the t-shirt colours and that sort of stuff, and his hair. And you might not think that he thinks it's important. He absolutely lives for this, right? Oh yeah. I had these words from someone last week. He lives for this, and every detail in the way that we that kind of detail as well. So does he. So all this is deliberate, but you have so many like cheap pops, right? So when you turn babyface, he's going to have the music. The music's going to be the biggest one. As soon as those notes hit, that's when he's turned babyface. He's not babyface until those notes hit. He's not. But it's like, he has so many things then in his arsenal. You start pulling out the moonsaults, you start doing kind of all those sort of things that he's not been doing. And you're just going to pick up momentum so quickly. And you're going to have to be careful, because that is going to be like a train running down the track. And if you divert it off again, you're really going to piss people off this time. Once he turns face, once he's fully face, you have to run with it. And that was where the decision to do this now is really interesting to me, because you are putting other things under threat, or other plans under threat, and you don't like to pivot. So, they're going to have to be really careful, because, this is the biggest babyface turn they've got available. It's the biggest babyface run they've got available. He's already a TV and live ticket draw, and pay-per-view draw with enough evidence of that. So it's not someone just coming in who needs to build their resume, and that takes time. So you've got to get this one right, and doing it now is interesting. So if when he turns face, he tries to change things, and we talked about his hair.
Don't even go. Don't even start this. They're not losing the mustache. The mustache is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. We're not losing the fucking mustache. I lost so many mustaches this year, okay? So many men shaved their mustaches. I would like this mustache to stay. Please. Thank you. That's all I'm asking for. Thank you very much. Ooh. This mustache and Yoda Tsuji's trunks, and I'm a happy girl.
See, I like the long boys on Yoda Tsuji. I'm like the odd one out on this one. I've accepted I've lost, okay? I've accepted everyone likes the trunks. But
mustache, please.
The thing is like, I expect him not to go back to his previous character, but it to be kind of an amalgamation of the two. Yeah, I think he's clever enough to do that. So maybe he does keep it. We'll see. But I just thought that there was I like listening to Tom Martin on The Fix on The Torch. And he was actually talking about Jey Uso. And he thinks, he's talking about the difference between chasing pops and long-term investments. And that kind of feels like the theme of kind of New Japan and AEW at the moment. So are you chasing the pops, or are you after this long-term investment? And if you get this term right, that's a huge long-term investment. Right. And I think, you have to. On the note of kind of as to reasons why, God, I'm talking far too much in this one. And I've just realised what comes next.
It's all right.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. This is it's one of those things. We got a question on kind of on BTE, and from our listener Lamora, and it said, I saw a post on the 4FW board, and I found it really interesting. Dave quoted it saying, "This is an excellent post." So, do you think the cancellation of BTE had any role in AEW's declining popularity / engagement? And sorry,
so I think we should read this post, because I think it's so good that it needs to be quoted in its entirety. And I think it because of how much we want to discuss the topic, because I think I agree with you that this is as a topic, this is fucking fascinating. And I think something you and I have been like, this got posted on the board like a while ago, and we've kind of held it for the last couple of weeks until a time that we could really dive into this topic. So this was from Kristen Patching, obviously it's on the F4W board. And she wrote, "Being the Elite, being canceled changed everything. I know they weren't getting many viewers by the end, probably because they changed, started feeding it out to the Dark Order skits, and it was made up more of others than the Bucks and Kenny and friends. But that's where I first fell in love with the characters. That's where I got to know them and their kids and their families and wanted them to succeed. I wanted these guys who sold merch at a table, who let us into their lives, who had charisma on video then, if possible, had even more charisma than when they stepped when they stepped into the ring to make it. They told the story of Kenny and Ibushi, of the Bucks, Kenny and Hangman in ways so much deeper than ever gets to be shown on TV. That they did, and they started getting more and more closed up about what was happening behind the scenes, likely because Tony is paranoid about leaks. Things changed. They went from being their own bosses to being under a new boss. It's like when Zack Ryder's the Long Island story went on to WWE YouTube, and they started censoring shit. It became really apparent when the Bucks tweeted after Punk's remark that if it was 3 years ago, they would have a counterfeit Bucks t-shirt up on PWTs. Why didn't they? It would have sold like gangbusters. They stopped being against the machine and became part of it. I'm so happy for them to be making bank now. They absolutely deserve it. But what is there to care about now? That's what's changed. Until there can be a story that's shown to me, not just told verbally, that makes me feel for these people, makes me want to get behind someone, makes me ready to spend my money on merch and shipping, it's just watching the show for the wrestling. It was meant to be about so much more than that. And I really, this was something that, I could stand up and applaud about it, I can't say I agree with every single thing that Christian said in this, but the whole gist of it, the fact that it changed so much of how I think a lot of people interact with AEW and interact with the product, and how so many of us are just missing our favorite guys, right? Because we don't see them in the way that we used to see them. And some of them are gone from TV forever. Right? They're just not, either because of injury or because of they've gone on to different promotions, they've changed jobs, right? And you just don't see them anymore. And there's a sadness to that because you really enjoyed it when it happened. And now we don't have it anymore. And it kind of sucks.
Yeah, and first and foremost, thank you, Kristen, for letting us use that. We really appreciate it. Thank you for being so open as soon as I approached you on it as well. But yeah, so you saw a little bit of nostalgia kick as soon as the BT kind of logo kind of changed on YouTube the other week, and people went kind of nuts over it. But the thing about BTE is that it was solely from the wrestler's fingertips, Yes. So it did remain different. It didn't matter what was going on in the overall product. It had its own kind of look and feel for the most part at the start. And then what happened was, so we asked for some feedback on this. I'll be perfectly honest, I asked and said, tell me what you think what happened at the end, because people are kind of looking at it. And said, look, the content was increasing. They picked up Rampage. Eventually, they picked up Collision. The market felt very much oversaturated, and it felt like it was creating like an overload on the fan base. Like they were demanding too much for people to consume, and the priority obviously is always going to be on the TV because that's what they want you to consume because that's what pays everybody's bills. Yep. And and the later years, it didn't feel like there was the kind of demand there, and it became more difficult to get people to participate in it from inside the company. And then you had everything that happened in 2022, and that meant, and we've seen this across the board with AEW, and we always go back to that letter that someone wrote into Dave a few months ago about honesty and transparency, and it left them without the ability to kind of be transparent. Right. And that hurts everyone, because as soon as someone's not being honest with you, or that relationship changes between those kind of characters or those people, in a sense, if you want to look at it that way, between them and the viewer. And it left them with an inability to be honest. And it's like building a wall between the two things. And then, as things got on, 2023, it just got stupid, isn't it? I think you can see this. You can remember this. Things got taken out of context and dissected. There was legal letters put in for things said on BTE, which is insane.
So stupid.
Yeah, and that was a similar reason for why they had content pulled from the show that they did, All Access. Thank you. And and then there was things like Kenny had the bottle with electrolytes in. And it's a Pepsi bottle, and you've got major outlets. You had Fightful, the Torch, all kind of going on. It's a water bottle with electrolytes in, and they're all claiming it's a Pepsi bottle and all this stuff, and it just makes it joyless, Yeah. And the quote you got was, instead of being used as a tool, it felt like it was being used as a weapon. Yeah. And that was very much what happened there. But it's one of those things where I think they can even acknowledge that people miss that type of interaction now, and there was nothing that replaced it. Right. So you then had the relationship kind of between the character and the audience had kind of definitely changed, and that deeper kind of more intimate connection that you had with things like BT that kind of allowed for them, them live responses where everyone said everybody was over, they knew who everybody was, and it was because you had this kind of engagement underneath that you don't really get now when you only see people for like a couple minutes each week or a couple minutes each month. You have something like after the C2, you might see Mortos every week, and then all of a sudden it's like, where is he?
Where's he gone?
Exactly. So they do definitely, people miss that sort of interaction. So it did fundamentally change how people interact with this product. And definitely, that year was in 2022 because that was when they kind of broke their relationship with the audience.
Yes.
For everything from Cody going to All Out and the mentality and, people feeling like the change the world mentality that everything started out of, that thing that they attached themselves to where they felt like it was more than a wrestling company, that was gone.
Right.
And also when these kind of connections they forged with the characters kind of felt worthless because they were then spun to one side. I know you felt that way, especially look at Orange Cassidy in 2022,
right.
Jobbing to Jay Lethal and stuff. Like, what are you doing? It's like,
well, again, it's not so much an issue of like I think it's like you said, you can absolutely argue that. I think there's an argument to be made that BTE itself, the way it had been set up and the way it had been going on for how many years, was probably on its last legs, maybe even before all the Punk stuff changed everything and 2022 changed everything. But that wasn't, as you said, replaced by anything. Right.
Yeah.
And somebody losing isn't a big deal, but the losing should be a part of something. And when it's not a part of something more important, and when it's not given any care or, it's like, if you don't give a shit, why should I? You don't care. Why am I putting the time and effort into doing this? And I think that's the part that I just still think to this day, it's one of the biggest pieces of AEW that Tony Khan just doesn't understand. He doesn't understand the fan interest does not start and end with him. Right. Yeah. And I think it's a big piece that, I understand. I will never, ever, ever object to anybody deciding however much they want to give their audience, right? We're not obligated to anything that any wrestler wants to give us, of their personal life, of their time, of their energy, right? But I do think that there's a big void where that BTE used to fill that has not been replaced by anything that has impacted the way that the AEW audience views the wrestlers that it used to love, and has prevented a lot of those wrestlers from getting over in a more meaningful and significant way. And I think that BTE filled a lot of holes that Tony's booking that we are now seeing and noticing more and more and more, because that's not there to kind of as a shortcut to get us to emotional places that maybe we wouldn't have gotten to with the booking as it had been, right? I know I said that awkwardly, but I'm hoping you can figure out what I'm saying.
No, I got you. I've got another theory on this, and this is to do with what I think. So when we look at AEW as a whole, and people get really frustrated about, business isn't turning or anything like that, I think there's something completely different. There's an ideology thing that they're struggling with. Right?
Yeah.
And you're going to bear with me. I want you to stop me on anything I say where I've not explained it well enough, because you know I won't.
Will.
Yeah, and you know I won't. You know I'll miss things, because once I get into this, it's kind of, and this comes from a political analogy. Because I was listening to, we all know, everyone says you kind of base style off Dave Meltzer, and it's like, oh, not quite. I base my style more off Emily Maitlis and the news agents, because that's what I think. But I'm quite politically minded. But they were talking about something this week, analogy that's very apt in this aspect, and it's to talk about the kind of strategies that different kind of parties and things in governments are running currently. And I think this is really representative in why AEW kind of are struggling to be an alternative and how replication doesn't work. So for example, WWE are running this the political strategy similar to what the Trump administration are at the moment, of kind of everything everywhere, right?
Yes.
So that's what we're seeing there in current time. So there's engagement across multiple mediums constantly. There's this flooding of content, this flooding of material. There's always something going on into the news cycle. And the trap that the Biden administration fell into, and the Starmer administration in the UK have both fallen into now, and what we see sometimes with Tony, is they are very much into having a single kind of top-heavy line in this barrage of kind of constant news and happenings. So Tony will go out and do an interview, and he'll just use one top line, and there's no engagement with that. It's just a happening, something that is, it's just within that constant news cycle, and then it just goes away. It's not reinforced in any way.
Give me an example of what you mean by like a top line. Like, do you mean like a motto, or do you mean like a thing that he says over and over?
No, so something that he says over and over. So he's like selling the success of something.
Yes.
And he's like, this is a really, so he'll say, say like, I don't know, pick a pay-per-view, like All In 2023 is probably a key one, right? So you have this really big stadium event, biggest wrestling attendance in history, and he's unable to convert that into anything. Because it's just a top line. There's nothing that resonates. There's nothing that creates any kind of engagement with it, right? So it's just happening. It's something that's said in that news cycle. It goes away, and then it's completely overrun by WWE with their constant programming, constant media, constant look of fan accessibility. Yeah. And these things mean far much more. So AEW has no accessibility. For the fan base in general. So that means that there is less loyalty, and then there's less, there's no longer kind of any course of secondary engagement. And what BTE represented was secondary engagement with this product in a way that can't be generated by constant flooding of things, where you can't compete with WWE. They can't compete with WWE in that way, right? No. So, there can be programs that generate that. If you look at Swerve and Hangman, that did generate massive secondary engagement, and what we're talking about with secondary engagement is, it sold tickets, it sold merch, there was creative art form, there was character discussion, there was story discussion, all these things where people were engaging with the content outside of just watching it or reading a news story about it and moving on. And for me, that is what AEW needs to compete, because if all you have is happenings, then people will just kind of pass you by, and especially in this kind of balkanized world of entertainment where, you don't just turn the TV on and then something follows and then you get into it. That's not what happens anymore. So you need reasons to kind of keep engaged.
So your argument is that instead of going shallower, instead of echoing WWE and being shallow, they need to go deeper on what they're producing and provide like more of what they're going to do. They need to do it better, and they need to do it more intensely than they normally would have. Sort
of. You've got to build kind of connections, right? So they can't compete on the news cycle. They can't flood the news cycle. They can't flood the market with content. And then, because whether that's because of their deal or the fact they don't have the resources or people with the motivation to do that, they've got to create secondary engagement in other ways. Taking BT out was another way that they couldn't. Then you've got things like, the heel face issue, where the people most representative of the company are constantly being shown to the audience as people that the company needs to be defended from. And this cycle just goes over and over and over. And this is just as much in value in regards to perception as is like the ground game, kind of grift war that goes on. AEW are not going to win over loyalty of fans by replicating WWE doing VIP live experiences, being the only way to engage with selected talent, or having poor merchandising options, or interviews mainly conducted just to let Tony get out his top line, or the issues that cause distrust with their live events, like we discussed with the Australia show. I'll give you an example, right, of what I mean in terms of misjudging this and not seeing that they need to create for an alternative, a more of a loyalty balance based on generating secondary engagement and closer relationship with your fan base, right? There's a shirt for Dynamite and Collision. This is such a small thing, but it's a great ideology kind of indicator. You'll see it on sale at the venues, right? And it shows their mentality, and it says on the back, so it has like Collision or Dynamite on the front. And on the back it says, New Year, New Deal. Ugh. What the fuck does that mean? What does that mean to the audience? It doesn't mean shit. It's like, it reminded me, and this is very heavy politically, but of like the Dems economy line in the last election. Yeah. Like, there's a top line, but it doesn't mean anything to that audience. And the only way that you're going to challenge like that everything everywhere thing that WWE are employing is to come up with kind of creative ways to engage your base kind of outside the norm, to allow them to feel closer to the product and to these characters than they ever have. To build that loyalty that rewards their engagement and once more kind of makes them feel like they're a part of something in a way they haven't felt with AEW in a long time now. And I think that when we look at what happened with AEW, there's this tendency to just go, well, in 2018, 2019, WWE was bad. But I think that's such a poor explanation, because there's been such a change in ideology and fan engagement strategy that's deeply affected AEW. And and you can see it because their talent are more noticeably more engaging when they work in other places, particularly like New Japan.
Well, I think that the perception that there was a period of time where rooting for AEW's success was something that people did and made sense and was not like, to borrow a phrase, cringe, because you were sort of saying, hey, we're out of that period where there's only one wrestling promotion. Like, we finally got to the place that so many of us wanted, which is a healthy wrestling ecosystem with multiple national promotions. That's great. Mm-hmm. But now we're well beyond that. And I think the idea that, especially like in our political climate and everything else, the idea that you're going to root for somebody to make a lot of money, like, nobody gave a shit about AEW getting a TV deal because it meant that they were going to Tony Khan was going to make a bunch of money. People wanted AEW to get a TV deal so they could keep watching it. And so again, we'd have a second promotion nationally. Like, nobody kind of cares. And I think this is sort of the tone deafness of like, hey, this was the third biggest gate for this year. Like, why, like, you're a billionaire. Like, and I'm not trying to say Tony Khan's a bad person. Like, I don't fucking know the guy. Like, he might be Jesus H. Christ. Like, who the fuck knows? But at the end of the day, like, I'm not going to root for the guy to make more money when he has more money than I'm ever going to could even conceive of existing, right? And it's great that he wants to use that money to pay for wrestlers and all that other stuff. But, like, I want to root for, like, the characters that I like. And I want to root for, like, the show that I enjoy. I don't want to root because you made $1.3 million. I don't fucking care. Like, what is that to me? Like, how is that supposed to get me excited about the promotion? Like, it's fine if WWE wants to use that, but why are we fucking copying WWE again? As opposed to, like, choosing a way to celebrate our own success and celebrate our success that's in a different way. Like, I don't know. It rings cold. It rings hollow. It rings corporate.
Yep.
It's that kind of like bullshit corporate, like when your company sends out a thing that talks about how they had the most profitable year and then you're not getting a cost of living increase, right? Yes. Like, stop doing that. Like, what do I give a shit that you made a bunch of money in Australia?
And then it bleeds over into the story. So you see something like the Adam Copeland thing where he's like, oh, we didn't have the belt for the debut. And you're just like...
Who gives a fuck?
Jesus Christ. And
nobody gives a shit about this stuff, guys.
But that's the thing. So their replication, they've become more formulaic, So we've had lots of this just telling me storytelling. That we're just telling you, like, we're not actually going to let it breathe or going to bleed it out or give things people to engage as the content moves forward. No, we're just going to tell you. And that does not work.
No.
It does not work in AEW because that's how AEW is different. That was how it was an alternative.
Right.
And it feels like they spent the last few years, trying story after story to kind of turn their business around, but they're not acknowledging the fact that this change in philosophy has had. And maybe that's because, the idea of that longer telling story model and having all these kind of secondary pieces wasn't Tony's idea in the first place. Maybe it's because they've got an increasing number of people from WWE who are now implementing strategies that were maybe a success there. I think we're seeing that with the live events, with the VIP stuff. Maybe it's a failure to build structure to the degree required. But whatever it is, we're now moving towards kind of duplication, and all that's going to do is make you secondary. That doesn't make you an alternative.
Well, yeah. You're never going to make as much money as WWE is, so why are you bragging about it? It just, like you said, it's like great that you had a successful gate. And if you want to talk to a business publication and you want to share that information in a business publication, that's fine, right? Like, there's times and places to discuss that kind of stuff. Like, I think about that one sports business journal that did the article on the first Grand Slam and how successful it was, right? Like, that's the kind of thing where it's like, this is an appropriate moment to share this. But your average fan doesn't give a flying fuck, right? Even us, right? You and I care so much about the business side of it, but we don't give, like, my connection to AEW is not based around how much money they fucking made in Australia, right? Like, that's the part, like, and if they want to sell VIP fan experiences, fine, go for it. If somebody's willing to buy that, then great, do it. Like, I don't know. I think it's short-sighted? Probably a little bit, yeah, but whatever. Like, but I just think, I just think that the whole point of, like, Tony Khan, like, it wasn't, like, this whole thing of, like, now it's about you, right? Like, the formation of AEW is about Tony Khan, and, like, the backstage stuff is about Tony Khan, and we very rarely see wrestlers giving media, and when they do give media, it's sort of, local stuff. We never see anything big on anybody non-local. It's always Tony Khan doing the press conferences. It's always that, your reputation's, like, not the greatest either, buddy. Like, you've taken some hits over the last 5 years, right?
He's
like,
a poor communicator as well. I don't think he's a great communicator in terms of being able to do that. But the clever communicators are the ones that can kind of say, you know, they relate it back to the fans. And I don't think he has the ability to do that. And I think what you get is that tendency, like in politics, you know, where people look at them and they just think, oh, they're all the same. That's the impression you kind of give your audience. And therefore, you know, they're more likely to stay with the market leader. They're not going to look at you like an alternative. Right. And I think, well, like, rather than picking up the next potential free agent that, you know, can come in and kick someone who has fan engagement already down the card, you need to start thinking about how to change the tide on this. How do you rebuild that trust and have your audience engage outside of the product in various ways that the constant news cycle kind of affects you less? You know, I think, kind of knowingly or unknowingly, you actually destroy one of your greatest assets without realizing it. And that's something, and you can see it, like, for example, right, I'll give you, there's got to be examples in this. So when it comes to like meet and greets, right, we don't have any.
They don't exist.
There's been 2 meet and greets for Kenny Omega in Japan this year. Right. When was the last time
we
you
had
did
the
one for
Rock and
AEW?
Roll we did a meet and greet with the Rock and Roll fucking Express.
Yeah, like, the accessibility to talent is just not there. And then, so that's reduced something in that live experience. Then you've got that loss of secondary engagement during the week. So there's no BT on a Monday anymore. There's no Dark on a Tuesday anymore.
Nope.
You've got this huge gap that WWE are able to vacuum. Then you've got the price gouging thing that's kind of gone on since 2022 that has kind of put people off. Then you've got things like the poor organisation, because what that does is, what we're looking for when we say this is we want kind of positive kind of secondary engagement, right? But what it leaves is all these other things that you do then creates that negative secondary engagement, and there's nothing to compete with it.
Right.
And that's something that they're kind of struggling with. So it's like a twofold thing. And then you've got the issue of the storytelling, right? So you'll get something like, you know, the Cope FDR, we're going to tell you we're best friends, and by the way, we don't save him when he's getting beaten up. And then something like the Kenny and Will thing, which, you know, I know why they went to get there where they did, but was also kind of disappointing for some people in terms of how quickly they were able to do that. He's my best friend. The journey
would have been nice.
Yeah, like, behave yourself. You know, and that's why people are also petrified around kind of lack of follow-up after big angles. Or also, you know, I've seen lots of people kind of petrified already. They're going to try and do some Swerve Hangman tag team within 3 months. You know, we're just going to rush through it because that's kind of how it feels now. So we don't have that feeling of that kind of getting emotionally invested in it growing. And I think this is why they can put on great shows with incredible matchups, and they just become happenings in kind of a never-ending news cycle, and why it never resonates further. And I also think it's why, you know, getting top baby faces across a show that your audience connects to, not WWE's, is such an important thing right now. And while heat is so much kind of being rejected.
Well, that's part of, like, why I think the Goto thing was so successful, right? Like, you just looked at the end of that show and you were like, so maybe you're a New Japan fan, right? And you lost Ospreay and you lost Okada, right? Yep. And Naito's in bad shape and Tanahashi's in bad shape, and you've been watching for a while and it's not what it used to be. But, like, holy shit! Right? Like, I liked Zack Sabre Jr. Like, he got a fucking shot with the belt. He did great. He had 2 dome defenses. He looked amazing. Right? I've been a big fan of Goto for years. Like, they're putting that fucking guy on top. They're feel-good moments that keep you invested in coming back because, like, you're not left feeling like shit. Right? Maybe you're kind of like in a down place, but the show itself is trying to leave you on a positive. And I feel like that's the thing with AEW, where it's like, if you want to restore the feeling, the endless heel beatdowns are probably not the way to do it. Like, you kind of want people to enjoy watching, right? And feel like they're going to have a good time. And, like, you know, last night, I mean, again, we're not going to discuss the specifics, but you had a bunch of people shouting bullshit at the end of one of your main events angles. Like, I don't know about that. Like, I'm not sure that's, and again, like, we're not going to get into it, whatever. I just think that's one of those things where it's like, why is it so hard to make people feel good now? Like, why is it so challenging? Like, it's like, the world is shit right now. People would like a thing to enjoy. Like, people would like to see the good guys win a little bit. That'd be fun for a change, right? Many of us suffering as we're watching, like, our fucking government destroy our country. But, you know, like, that's fine. I guess we'll watch another heel heat segment and I'll feel better about my life and my choices. Like,
yeah, I just think that you've definitely got to do that. You've got to have these kind of positive kind of babyface models that people connect with, and you have to find ways that the audience can engage with them. And, you know, until then, if you don't give anyone a reason for kind of secondary engagement, they'll just watch it and turn it off and nothing else happens. And that's what's happening right now. And that's where they can't compete. You know, and when you look at like the Death Rider stuff, it also relies on elevation. So here's a question for you, right? Okay, who have you... I've got two, actually. Who do you think has been the most elevated person in AEW in the last 6 months since the Death Rider thing started? I actually have two, actually, but go for one.
I mean, it has to be Copeland, right? Like, Copeland and Moxley. I don't feel like there's been anybody else particularly elevated throughout this angle.
Yeah, but in terms of AEW as a whole.
As a whole?
Yeah. In the last 6 months. Yeah? Okay. So, the only names I could come up with was Carl Fletcher.
Yeah,
again,
yep.
Not elevated in this angle. Elevated outside this angle by Will Ospreay. And Harley Cameron with Mercedes Moné. Okay?
Yeah.
And then you look at it, who will likely be the most elevated person in the next 6 months? What's the betting that it comes from outside this angle? And your top angle is so important because it kind of it drives traffic, you know. It's the thing leading the kind of the horse leading the carriage.
No, I like the thing leading the thing. I feel like you should do that. It is the thing leading the thing. I agree with that.
But it's the horse leading the carriage, isn't it? So the longer you leave it with periods without something to positively engage in, you know, the longer this kind of becomes more difficult. But yeah, I think it's a philosophy thing, and I think that they are falling into the trap that a lot of other places, you know, political kind of bodies are falling into, where we're still trying to communicate in the way that we used to, even though all the mediums have changed. And this is the thing, you don't see it. It's like BTE was a driver of like the #1 shirt at Hot Topic in 2017. That was not done by saying a top line. They didn't go out there and say, we sold this many t-shirts last year, we're fantastic. They went out and said, you know, have this, you know, engage with us at shows, engage with us in what we're doing in ring, you know, follow this product, become engaged in a different way. And that leads to that.
Right.
There's a journey there that's missing, and that's what BTE represented, not just in the character journey, because I think we are seeing some of the gaps in the storytelling now, but also in kind of that engagement thing that, you know, supports all these other metrics. And maybe that's more difficult now because everyone's so reliant on TV money that becomes the priority. But it all comes together. You know, if you get all the other things right, then you'll get more on that side as well. So it's just that it's been bugging me all week, and especially when we talk about all the feedback that we got from Australia. Yeah. And it very much feels like there's just this missing secondary engagement with AEW, and that's what's preventing them from kind of being more competitive in their own way, because they're too reliant on trying to duplicate things, and they don't need to. You know, you've got this incredible roster, you've got these incredible storytellers that are different, but we don't need to be kind of relying on, and then it feels so common when you look at this main angle and it's straight out of 2019 WWE, probably looking at a 2012, you know, Mick Foley, Dean Ambrose match as the pay-per-view. It's like, you've got to be looking at these things now, especially now they have the TV deal. But yeah, this was a really long answer on something that was quite simple about BTE, I guess, but it just kind of invoked a lot of kind of philosophical, oh my God, thinking.
Philosophical works. I support it. No, I think it's a good point. I think saying that AEW has so many more TV hours than it did at one time, and yet somehow the stories are less deep and less emotionally satisfying is, you know, kind of an interesting problem to sort of maybe say, how do you solve that?
Sure. Okay.
Good job.
Shall we? We need to get through some things. So
you do, but I think we have to talk about the AEW releases first.
Yeah,
this is a big one, right? So this past Monday, AEW released Ricky Starks and Miro. It's believed that Malachi Black's deal ended. Not that he was released, but that his deal ended. And all three. Ricky Starks showed up on NXT on Tuesday night. Nameless.
Still nameless.
Still nameless. He's going to have a giant contract signing. We're not sure what name is going to go on it. Everybody's been really enjoying coming up with some insane NXT style names for Ricky Starks. But it's expected that Miro and Malachi Black or Aleister Black will show up in WWE very soon. I am endlessly fascinated by this topic. I could probably talk about it for hours and hours and hours. I'm not going to. I think it is unbelievable to me that Ricky Starks would be like, yes, I'm going to NXT. And that would be like viewed as a positive. I can't, I mean, maybe that's just me and how I look at these promotions, but I can't see that, when you look at Penta going to the main roster, I'm pretty sure that if Miro or Black show up, that they'd be going immediately to the main roster as opposed to NXT.
They've already teased Black a little bit on the main roster, haven't they?
Yeah. I think so. I
believe there's been something where they've been kind of using kind of his old phrases as Aleister Black, kind of feeding them in,
Yeah. So, like, that to me is like, and it, there's been a lot of discussion about Ricky Starks. I think we have really avoided a lot of it because I don't think it really particularly interests either of us.
Nope.
But I think the understanding is that this move to NXT was a long time coming. That, this was not something that was a surprise per se. So I'm sort of surprised that, I don't know. Listen, if that's what you want, buddy, good for you. But I think that I would argue that in 2023, Ricky Starks was one of the most pushed people in AEW. He certainly got a lot more TV time than a lot of people did.
Shout out to our friend Max for his incredible post that comes up all the time on that.
But seriously, like, I can't see how you'd look at the way that Ricky Starks was treated in AEW and think, he should go to NXT, like that's equitable. I would certainly understand if he decided he wanted to go to the main roster WWE, sure, fine. But like, that's just the part that I'm sort of endlessly surprised and stunned by. And I guess, listen, everybody's different. People want to work in different places. I support workers' rights. Like, go wherever the fuck you want to go, buddy. But like, good Lord, let's see how this goes. I just can't envision that he's going to be main roster bound anytime soon. I don't know.
Okay, so what do you think of this theory that this is kind of one of the reasons behind this is so twofold. So Dave has the theory that they want to show to their investors that 95% of the talent have gone for NXT to show some sort of value to NXT.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. And then the second theory is that they're trying to kind of downgrade AEW in terms of their competition to make it competition to NXT again and not to their main roster. So by putting him in there, you are saying that NXT is at the level of the AEW roster.
Listen, I think both of these as theories make sense. They're thoughtful. They have thought behind them. I don't totally disagree with them. I still think that if WWE looked at Ricky Starks and said, this guy's a fucking big deal, he'd be on the main roster regardless. I don't think that they would have him pause at NXT. Like, to me, this is a vote of no confidence before you even start. And that is I said to myself a year ago, I said, well, Ricky Starks has to be going to the main roster because why would you give up AEW to go to NXT? Right?
Yeah, and he told them, right? He said, I'm not going to extend. I don't want. Can you not put my option up?
And he's not Ethan Page. Like, Ethan Page, sure, like, that makes sense. Ethan Page's ceiling on AEW was way lower than Ricky Starks' ceiling. Mm-hmm. Like, way lower, right? But, like, good Lord, I don't know. This one baffles me, and I'm very fascinated to see how it turns out.
It's not just that as well. It's this impact of now having that flow across to WWE. I think Justin Barrasso had the article on a day where it was headlined, Ricky Starks makes NXT debut. Will Miro Malachi Black be next? Are they all a good fit for an already overcrowded WWE?
Well, now we start to be in that situation, right, where the door starts swinging the other way, where WWE is committed to bringing in all of these guys, or maybe has made promises to certain people, which, again, no judgment on that. I think we both know that happens across the board on multiple promotions. But you end up in a situation where you've got people leaking about Penta's debut and how pissed they were at that. And so it's like, well, are we going to end up with, and especially during WrestleMania season where the leaks are already fucking flying.
They're killing me. Every time I go onto a site to just grab some detail and stuff for this, I'm like, there's something new, and I'm like, oh,
this one's pissed at that one, and that one's pissed at this one, and now this one wants to be in that match and not the match. But whatever. Regardless, I do think that releasing both Miro and Starks at the same time that Black's contract was up makes a lot of sense because it does dull the impact of having those guys show up. I do think that having Miro and Starks off TV for a while. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I think it does sort of make sense, and that I do think it sort of takes away a little bit of the hotness of that kind of like quick immediate debut. But I also think we're in a position pretty soon where you're going to end up with the same situation that you have in AEW, where the WWE, ex-WWE debuts mean less and less. And I think there's going to come a point where the ex-AEW debuts mean less and less. And so it's like, what's the value of doing this?
Yeah, it's that Tom Martin thing. You're chasing quick pops rather than a long-term investment.
Right.
So rather than making that work yourself, you're just throwing people out there, and you see so much of their kind of talent come up from NXT and then have nowhere to go, and then end up being released. And a lot of the talent they released this week were people that had nothing to do after coming up from NXT.
Right.
So you're not making the investment in them. You're instead choosing the cheap solution. It's a complete flip from 2022 AEW. Complete flip. It's the same thing happening, and this is where we say it's a cycle. It kind of bleeds in and out each way, but that's exactly what's happening. So we will see where that kind of leads them to, and I think you can really feel these tensions brewing, especially because theirs is so concentrated with the WrestleMania thing into this year. Continuing on to WWE, we I feel like we almost got ahead of ourselves last week, and kind of, I know it's very easy to kind of doom about the kind of legal things going on, but there were kind of several updates since our last podcast.
Yes.
So first and foremost, the Ring Boys lawsuit can now continue.
Yes.
The state...
The Maryland State Supreme Court ruled that they will not they will not remove that statute of limitations removal, or they will not reinstate the statute of limitations for sex crimes. It's not statute of limitations; it's not criminal in civil cases. Let me put it that way. So the Catholic Church, the Boy Scouts, and WWE lost. They all filed in support of that lawsuit. Yeah.
And that means that, that can continue. The Post Wrestling have reported that there is a likelihood that there are other people that wish to join the lawsuit, and if that's to happen, they will need to refile the complaint, similar to what we just seen with the Janelle Grant case.
Yes.
But that will now continue, and that's good news for all those victims that are looking to be recompensated for, and just to be heard for what happened to them. There was only one question about that to Linda McMahon in her confirmation hearing at the Senate on Thursday to become Donald Trump's Secretary of Education, which it was kind of, for me, I think, being a Brit, and we're very used to, we have select committees here for different things, and they tend to work together and each other. So even though we might have Conservatives and Labour Party or whoever, like in these situations, to kind of follow up on these things, and there was just no follow up. There's no follow-up in that system and that thing. And I know that there's been confirmation hearings for people that are deemed even far more problematic than Linda. And that probably meant that that's where a lot of the press went. But yeah, it was disappointing that there was no kind of real kind of pressure on that. She was able to walk straight out of it. And it was interesting, how tied WWE is to this administration, the same way UFC is now. She was there with Stephanie, with Triple H, with Shane McMahon. You remember all them discussions about it'd be fun to bring Shane McMahon into AEW? That looks so clever now. But yeah, they were all on camera kind of behind her. So they are absolutely linked to this administration fully.
Yeah, and it was fascinating also to, again, we're constantly reassured that Triple H is not racist, that he has no issue with African Americans, that anything he said or wrote about, blackface or anything else that he's done is just, it's all in the past. And yet there he is, as Linda McMahon talks about how, maybe we need to make DEI illegal, right? That we shouldn't be teaching Black history, and that, any opportunity to talk about Title IX and sexual harassment as it relates to sexual abuse and issues on college campuses, I think it's one of those things to see Triple H sitting right behind her as she espouses some of that shit, makes you think a little bit, or it should. But, people are very happy to parrot whatever they're told, and they're told that Triple H isn't racist, so he must not be.
Yeah, there's definitely more questions and answers, and I think as this administration continues, that will continue to be the case. We're already seeing, there's a lot. Has there been any acknowledgement so far for them of Black History Month?
No,
no,
so, of course not.
So yeah, these sort of things are going to come into, and we're seeing this, a lot of brands, consumer brands as well, rolling over and kind of
Yeah, it's not just WWE.
No,
I'm not
it's
trying
not.
to single them out.
But
There are a lot of other places that are happy to do that.
Yeah, it's just something to note at the moment. The other thing that happened last couple of weeks was the Federal Appeal Court ruling around Vince McMahon and what turned out to be Jerry McDevitt.
Yes, this was fascinating. So the United States has a rule that, and again, I'm not trying to say that other countries don't have this, but I want to be specific, that any communication between a client and an attorney is privileged, right? So even if it's potentially evidentiary, right? If Vince McMahon says to Jerry McDevitt in an email, everything that Janelle Grant claims is true, that's a privileged communication and can't be used against him in a court of law. So the only time that doesn't happen is there's like a specific excerpt for that is criminal, right? So there's like a crime fraud exception is what it's called. And so in this case, the court and an appeals court came to the conclusion that communication and stuff that they had asked Vince McMahon to turn over in discovery that Vince McMahon claimed was privileged information between him and his attorney was subject to the crime fraud exception, which meant that Jerry McDevitt and Vince McMahon almost certainly engaged in a crime, and therefore the communication needed to be turned over to the grand jury. That's kind of what that was. It's why it was significant is because the judge and the appeals court agreed that was actually probably the case. Now, the other interesting thing in this is that the appeals court ruling stated that Vince McMahon is currently under grand jury investigation, but Vince McMahon's lawyers were very quick to tell, I believe it was in multiple places, the Post, Dave Meltzer also had it, that there is no longer a criminal investigation into Vince McMahon. There was no confirmation from the Southern District Court of New York. There's no other, this is all coming from Vince McMahon's side that he's no longer under criminal investigation. This may be true, and in very cases probably likely true, but many people are like, well, let's wait and see if we can get something other than from Vince McMahon's attorneys on this.
Yeah, and even the Post article wasn't completely committed to it. It had the headline, and they've run lines from Vince McMahon's lawyers team before. They did it for the when he first responded to the Grant case, but even they was like, if it's true that he's not longer under investigation, so they weren't willing to fully commit completely in their article either. So yeah, it is very much a we have one side claiming this, but until there is anything further, I don't think you can say that everything is fully dismissed.
It will be interesting because one of the other things that's going on right now is that the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, was potentially under criminal indictment or had been criminally indicted by the Southern District Court of New York for bribery and other things, and that those charges were recently dropped. And there's been a lot of other former district attorneys or federal attorneys, have been saying that this is like bullshit, that it was a quid pro quo that Eric Adams would allow the Trump administration and immigration enforcement to act without the city getting involved or suggesting that they shouldn't be doing that. And so as a result, they went ahead and dropped the case against him, the criminal fraud case. So I think that's one of those things where it's like, is the Southern District keeping its mouth shut about what cases it has dropped or has not dropped to try and take some heat off in terms of like, hey, you're just fucking blatantly illegal now, but whatever.
Yeah, and I think that we're always reluctant to think they will do anything with this because of the ties that they have to the administration. But, that's where we are on that one. The other thing that we've got coming up in terms of updates was, this was in the Observer on Friday, that the reply to Janelle Grant's team's amended complaint is due for WWE, John Laurinaitis and Vince McMahon by the 21st of February this year.
Yes.
So we will see an update likely in the next week on what's going forward with that case. I think that's pretty much everything that we had to cover today. We got pretty deep into
a little hodgepodge of topics that we went hard on.
into the political world as well. But
we're always going to cover that shit.
Absolutely, yeah. It's we try and balance everything out, and unfortunately, we're not very good at living in bubbles, so it's not going to happen. But I want to say thank you first and foremost for everyone that sent us such fantastic feedback for the Australia shows that really kind of helped to kind of get a balanced view outside of the kind of mudslinging and everything else that goes on. So we really, really appreciate it. It's such a valuable insight, even if you think the details are worthless. They truly aren't. So thank you very, very much to Sams. Yeah, two Sams.
Yes.
Yeah, two Sams, and to Corey for that, and to other
Yes,
people that have kind of given us little details as well. So
anytime anyone contacts us with any information at all, we're always so grateful to you, because it always gives us a better, bigger, fuller picture of what's happening. And one account is always, everybody's perspective is always everybody's perspective, and having more than one person say, hey, this is how I experience this, is always really helpful, and we can't thank people enough.
Yeah, we're so grateful for the interaction that we get and the openness that we get from so many people now. It's it's just a huge tool, huge value for us. So yeah, thank you very much. Secondary thank you to our friend Morgan, who debuted our shirt from www.chopped-tees/Trish and Sarah on Dynamite.
That was such a trip. Oh my God. I'm like, there's a shirt with my name on it. Oh boy.
It's surreal, and I don't think we'll ever get used to it. It
was amazing.
We thank you so much for your support as well, because he's been with us since the very, very start.
Yes.
And in times, because of tiny little things, opened doors for us, actually, in really strange ways. So we are so appreciative of you. It was very funny to see that held up right in the middle of the MJF Dustin Rhodes promo.
That was something. Like, that was absolutely something. I was like, yep, that's okay, thank you. Yeah, we're just, the fact that we have merch that anyone would buy, let alone wear to a Dynamite show, is just such an incredible, we don't take that for granted for a second. And I don't think we ever will. So thank you so, so much. We really, really appreciate it.
And I always felt like I underthink, because when we started doing merch, I was like, hey, I want to see it like when I was a kid and I'd look through football programs and it'd be like, on tour, and like, send me your pictures and we'll send you a hat. But yeah, I am sending you a hat anyway, as just a thank you anyway. But just because it made us laugh so much as well in terms of the timing and everything. But no, it's just surreal. I think that's the only way to describe it. So yeah, we are so grateful for everybody's support. It's not we're not selling anything. We don't have a Patreon.
No. It's just us.
It's just us and
chatting on a Sunday.
Chatting on a Sunday night while I grumble about having to go back to trains on Monday. Yeah, no, but we thank you very much, and also thank you. So it's Sunday. Producer Leah is going to turn this thing around so quickly to get it out on Tuesday, and we're so appreciative of the work she does, especially in terms of all the other things that we do around this as well, because I do nothing, right? Other than notes, I do nothing.
You
right?
look amazing, though. Like, you're providing us with you're like my aura.
No one can see me. It's good. It's a good thing. So bad when we have to do video podcasts. I'm like, I gotta... God, I can't just wear football shirts all the time.
Check my resting bitch face.
Yeah. I had she was like, oh, you have perfect YouTube visual face. I'm like, that's not a good thing. But no, Leah does all the hard work as well, cuts the clips for us, sets everything up, just makes this so much more manageable. So thank you very much. Yeah, effortless. So thank you very much, Leah, for everything that you do. Tunnel Talk had a great set of discussion around the characters of Hangman and MJF and their interaction today. So make sure you listen to that as well.
And an extensive breakdown of Chuck Taylor's appearance on Dynamite last week.
Oh yeah, it was like Christmas. Christmas with Tunnel Talk.
I appreciated it a lot. I was appreciating it a lot.
They got in the same week. They got Chuck Taylor back on Dynamite and shirtless Bucks in Osaka.
What else could you ask for?
What else could you ask for?
Not just shirtless Bucks, but Matt Jackson taking his shirt off and then looking in the corner and going, I'm fucking jacked!
And his hair was down. He had his princess hair out, and he's doing YouTube content. So Tunnel Talk. Wow. Tunnel Talk on the rise this week. Influence.
Their influence.
Absolutely. Their influence is it's killing it. So make sure you listen to Tunnel Talk this week and every other week on a Sunday. And you can also listen to all the other shows on our fantastic Social Suplex network with One Nation Radio, All Things Elite, the AW Match Guide. I'm going to get this so wrong.
Imp's WWE Adventure.
Yep, keeping it strong style. Have we missed any? Am I getting in trouble?
One Nation Radio.
Done that one? Did that one?
Okay, then I think we got everything.
We got everybody. You can do that at www.socialsuplex.com or on Red Circle or wherever you find your podcast. You can also speak to us at our Discord for the Social Suplex Discord. Come and join, speak to everybody else, join the conversation. it's very New Japan heavy at the moment. So I've quite enjoyed that.
I should also say that I did a guest spot this week on Jesse Cummings, the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. We talked about the Death Riders, which I really enjoyed. It was a fun conversation for me.
The conversation. She enjoyed the conversation.
Just bitching. I don't know, whatever it was. But it was a good time. So please check it out. Jesse's podcast is always enjoyable listen and one we both recommend.
Yeah, we love listening to him, and he's, we need more people like him, trained journalists who assess everything from a very calm manner and really get their points across. So yeah, definitely listen to that. I found it great fun. There was a couple of lines where I just laughed so hard and loud. And if you want to know a little bit more about Sarah, you'll find...
You don't need to know anything about me.
It's going to kill me for that after. You can also contact us at trishandsarahpod@gmail.com, trishandsarahpod@gmail.com, on Twitter at Trish and Sarah, on Blue Sky under our own acronyms. Emmy's going to kill you every week. She's going to put a timer on you. It's going to be like
every week.
It's going to be a hangman.
Emmy.
It's going to be like a hangman championship timer, isn't it? When she's like every week she had something on. It's going to be like that. I'm going to get it fixed eventually. Yes, but you can find us on all major platforms. We will be back in 2 weeks, which will be the week before Revolution. So we'll see how somebody's booking shakes out, and we'll see more about the lots of other developments across the wrestling world. So until then, I've been Trish.
I've been Sarah.
And thank you for listening to the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast.
There are some things you wouldn't mind being stuck with, like a large unexpected inheritance. An always on the verge of death phone that has to be plugged in just right so it charges is not one of those things. Switch to Verizon and we'll pay off your old phone. Up to $800 via prepaid MasterCard so you can get a new one. Just trade in any phone from our top brands on any unlimited plan. With new line on My Plan. Additional terms apply for trade-in and pay off your phone offer. See Verizon.com for details.